Hi everyone, I'm Carolyn with Tome Society, and I'm really excited to have Kimberly Gabriel, author of Every Stolen Breath from our Tome Society It List, here with me tonight. So thank you, Kimberly, so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah. So we'll just start off, if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, your life, your career, your books, all that good stuff.
Sure. I have actually been a teacher for the last 21 years. I teach seventh grade literacy, and I'd always wanted to be a writer. It was something that was a goal of mine since I was in the fourth grade, and I wrote and bound my first book of really bad, terrible poetry that my mom was really, really proud of. And so that kind of set me on this path to one day write my own book. And in my 20s, I did some writing on the side. And in my 30s, I decided I really want to try to fulfill this goal and pursue it a little bit with more intent. And so that's when I started writing Every Stolen Breath. This was actually the second book that I tried to get published. The first book did well enough where I thought, okay, I got kind of close to that. Now I need to write a second book and see if I can break into the publishing industry. And I did. So Every Stolen Breath was my debut novel. It came out in November 2019, and it's been a lot of fun. It was, a whirlwind when it released. And then, of course, COVID came along and that changed the trajectory of, all the events that I was doing. And all the places that I was going at, I wasn't necessarily going places anymore, but I get to hang out virtually with kids and do interviews this way. So it's been really fun too.
Awesome. Good. Yeah, we've been very thankful for technology to still let us connect and talk to all our authors and stuff. So great. Um, So yeah, like I was telling you before we started recording, I am in the middle of Every Stolen Breath, and I am hooked. I am like I really am gonna stay up tonight and finish it because I can't wait to see what happens in the end. Um,
I'll
so
have to let you know if you look
yeah,
good.
one of our team members, Hannah, was one of our original readers of the book to recommend it, and so she came up with some really good questions. Um, so first, we know that the swarm attacks in Every Stolen Breath are based on true events. Can you tell us more about that and how that inspired your story?
Yeah. So it was in about 2011 when I was living in the city of Chicago, and there were these attacks that were happening downtown where about 20 teens would blend in with a crowd on pretty popular streets in Chicago, very touristy areas. And then they would all give a signal to one another via social media, and they would kind of converge on one person and beat them up. And that thought terrified me. They were happening close to where I lived. I was pregnant with my second child at the time. And so every time my husband left our home, I was like terrified he was going to get attacked by one of these flash mobs, they were called, in 2011, which is irrational. Like they only happened, I don't know, maybe a handful of times during the summer of 2011, maybe 3 or 4 times. And it's not that the city of Chicago doesn't have other violence, but there was something extra terrifying about these attacks that kind of went rampant through the city, where this is what we all talked about and this is what all scared us. Um, and it stuck with me how scared I was of this particular type of attack, uh, until I started deciding that that might be a really great premise for a book. If I was having such an emotional attachment to what was going on in the city, maybe that would be a great premise and a backdrop for a book, and I could try to elicit that fear and convey it to my readers as well.
Yeah, well, I think you did a great job from what I have read
Thanks.
so far. Yeah, you can definitely feel that in Leah. Um, so the whole book is kind of a puzzle putting together who's behind the attacks. Did you know from the beginning when you were writing it who would be behind it all? Which I don't know yet, so you don't have to say if you don't want. It's okay if you do. Or did it kind of come together as you were writing it?
There, it kind of went back and forth between a few different people, and I wasn't quite sure which direction it was going to go until I got deeper into each draft, and then when I got to the end, I definitely had my direction. The way that I tend to write is that I will kind of pants the first half of a book. I will go into it with an idea and a very rough outline, and I'll just sit down and see who these characters are and where the story is going to take me as a writer. And then about halfway into that draft, I will plot the rest and very intentionally finish the book. So I had drafted about half of it when I decided exactly who was going to be the bad person at the end and how that was all going to play out.
So kind of along those same lines, it has a lot of unexpected twists and turns. So and you mentioned a little bit about your writing process. Can you kind of talk us through that, how you wrote those unexpected plot twists?
Yeah, a lot of it came about because I'm a reader that likes plot twists, and I'm a reader that likes tension. And I would even call myself, for a large part of my life, an impatient reader, where I need a lot of tension on the page or something that's going to keep me in a book. And as a teacher of seventh grade, I see that in my readers. I see my kids, get bored with books easily, or they need a lot of tension. They need a lot going on to keep them invested. And when you are able to find that right book for that right kid that is so engaging, then they fly through it. And so I went into Every Stolen Breath wanting to do exactly that, to pack as much tension as I could on every single page, to keep readers like my students invested and engaged, and readers like who I used to be as a kid, very engaged, to make them want to get to the end as quickly as possible. So that was my goal. I think with every draft that I had, I kind of went back to the chapter and said, okay, now how can I make this worse? Or how can I, pack more tension into this to just keep the pages turning?
Yeah, it's like the definition of a page turner.
Thanks.
All right. Well, okay, so about the characters, Leah is a really great character. I really like her a lot so far. She has a lot of like inner strength in the face of all this adversity that she's had in her life. And even when dealing with like her asthma and then like anxiety, and show some signs of PTSD and things like that. What kind of research did you do to get into her mindset?
A ton of research. I researched asthma. I have a kid with asthma, and so that's kind of where it all started. I watched, his struggle with asthma when he was little, and I wrote this when he was little. He had a really hard time and a lot of struggles with asthma, and so as he got older, he got better, and Leah did not. And so I did a lot of research trying to figure out what asthma would feel like, what a panic attack would feel like. I researched PTSD, and I looked for that type of reaction that she could feel, so that I was being as authentic to her as I possibly could. And then a lot of it was kind of life experience, and also, based on students that I see in my classroom. I went into Every Stolen Breath wanting her to be strong, but not wanting her to be like a Katniss Everdeen strong, which I love Katniss. I mean, I read the book and I want to like grab a bow and arrow and go shoot targets and think that I'm as cool and as bad as Katniss is. But that's just not who I am. And when I, as a teacher, look out in my classroom, I see the Katniss Everdeens, but then I also see those kids with asthma and anxiety and, other things that are distracting them, their backstory. They might have something going on at home, or they might be struggling with other things in my classroom, and yet they show up every single day and they exhibit their own type of strength, just being there and focusing on my lessons. So I think there is a beautiful type of strength in the kids who have asthma and have anxiety and have ADHD and have these things going on at home that are taking up brain space, and they push past that on a day-to-day basis to not only show up in my classroom, but accomplish their goals in life. And that's what I wanted to try to portray in Leah, this girl who showed her strength by pushing past what she perceives are weaknesses. But in the end, they kind of define her character and make her who she is.
That's great. So still along lines of characters, a lot of the characters are very different and respond to situations very differently. What are some things you did when you were writing to kind of get into their heads and develop them as the book goes along?
Oh, that's a really good question. One thing that I tend to do in later drafts is that I will trace one character at a time. And so I will get into that character's head and I will look at every single scene that that character is in to make sure that that character is being as authentic to himself or herself as they can possibly be. I think that's when I go really deep into a character's mind. And then I have lists for all of my characters. I define them by what they want, and I define them by what they need, and I define them by the music they like and the clothes that they're going to wear. And I have a whole backstory for every single one of my characters that you may or may not see on the page, but that's all just helping me understand who these people are so that I can be true to them in every single scene and kind of represent them in every single scene so that when you get to these scenes where they're all together, you see the different ways that they would all react. That's something that I like to do in my scenes is I like to have competing objectives where they all come into the chapter and they all want different things in the chapter. And it makes writing interesting and hopefully the reading interesting as well.
Great. What would you say is the biggest lesson or takeaway you want readers to take from Every Stolen Breath?
I went into this wanting kids and readers to just enjoy the book. That was my main goal. I wanted to give kids a book that they would enjoy because, as a teacher, that's my primary objective is just to get kids to enjoy reading. And then somewhere along the way, I started to realize that, I was trying to send a pretty powerful message about strength. And I kind of already addressed this, but it's really that strength can be seen in so many different ways and in so many different forms. And you don't have to be physically strong to show strength. And you don't have to have this mental strength that never breaks to be strong. And you don't have to be the leader in the classroom that everybody's looking at. You can show strength in ways by just showing up or just pursuing something and not quitting. I think that Leah is an incredibly strong character, and that's what I wanted her to be. But I also wanted to show that she has vulnerabilities, and she has things that she struggles with. And again, her strength is pushing past all of that to achieve her goals.
That's great. I recently read an article that said 1 in 4 teenagers now struggle with anxiety or some form of mental health. So I think it's really awesome that you show her overcoming that and still, like you said, not giving up and showing a lot of perseverance. So I think that's a really good example for our readers to follow. So that's
Thank
great.
you. Those were the kids that I had in mind as I was writing this.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have some fun questions that we have been asking all of our authors. So a lot of our chapters will use the It List books for like, try, why book recommendations. So if you liked Every Stolen Breath, you should try this book because X, Y, and Z. So do you have any like, try, why recommendations for fans of Every Stolen Breath?
Do, and I have many because I'm a teacher and I love getting book recommendations. So if you like Every Stolen Breath, I would highly recommend Karen McManus. This one is Two Can Keep a Secret. She also did One of Us Is Lying and One of Us Is Next. She writes thrillers. She packs the tension in there. She has really interesting characters, and I love her books. I also have Overdrive by Dawn Hughes that you might not be as familiar with. This is a book that is very tense. It's about a group of teens who have to work together kind of as a heist team to steal a bunch of cars for a guy who's forcing them to do it, kind of like an Ocean's 11 meets Gone in 60 Seconds. This is a lot of tension on the page. This is a page turner, and I love this one. And then my last one is going to be The Window by Amelia Brunskill, and I don't have that one with me, but that is another thriller with just great character development that I really enjoyed, and my students have also enjoyed that one.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We're going to link to those in the notes of our interview when we send it out to our chapters. So thank you for that. Those sound great. All right. And then do you have any songs or a playlist that inspired you or that you'd kind of consider as a soundtrack for Every Stolen Breath?
I do. I listened to a bunch of different music, and the music that I would choose for her all had female vocalists that had kind of a rough sounding voice, but then also sang in this very vulnerable way. So I loved listening to Pink while I was writing Leah. And I loved listening to Of Monsters and Men. I have a bunch of their songs on the playlist. But the soundtrack that I listened to the most was the Zero Dark 30 soundtrack.
Mhm.
Which is a movie soundtrack about the girl who tracked down Osama bin Laden,
Mhm.
and the SEAL team that was able to capture and eventually kill him. And if you listen to this music, it is really tense and really scary. And I would listen to this music nonstop while I was writing, especially during the really scary scenes. And I would get so into the scene, I would get really scared myself because the music is so intense. So if you're looking for really intense music, no words, just the soundtrack, the Zero Dark 30 soundtrack was what I listened to nonstop during this.
Okay. All right. We'll link to those too. All right. Thank you. So for future, do you have any new books in the works or anything fun coming up that you want to tell us about?
I am currently working on revisions for a book that I'm getting to my agent very soon, and I can't say too much about it other than it's another thriller, but this has a paranormal element to it, and it opens up with, of course, a dead girl and a guy, a gamer who starts working together with a team to figure out what went wrong on this horrible night that nobody can remember, or at least nobody can remember with any accuracy. Yeah, and that's all I can say about that. And it takes place near Chicago, so I like that setting. I think I'll continue writing in that setting.
Yeah, well, that sounds like something I'd like to read already. So we'll be on the
Thanks.
lookout for that for sure. All right.
Thank
Well,
you.
anything else you have for us about Every Stolen Breath or about writing or reading or anything else you want to tell us?
Oh, I will, I think, put my plug in there that, reading is so important, especially during a time like this. And so, I've looked at your list, your it list and the nominees, and you have such phenomenal books on that. And I would encourage all readers just to devour as much reading as you possibly can right now. Because I don't know what your scenario is, but, in our scenario, we don't get full in-person learning for the entire day. We're in a hybrid scenario. And so, learning just has to be different this year. And I keep encouraging my kids to read as much as they possibly can, because the more you read, the smarter you'll become, the more you'll be able to think critically. And the books that you guys have chosen are just so fantastic. I would recommend them all. I've read most of them myself and I love them.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you. All right, well, that's all we have. So thank you very much for taking the time to answer some of our questions and talk about Every Stolen Breath with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.